Hello, everybody. We are going to talk about structs. I understand that's what you've been working on this week. So here is structs in Zybooks. Struct is essentially trying to group different data members together. So you've seen arrays where you can create a list of items of the same data type. A struct is more like a record. So if you want to put different data members together to form a struct, form a record, like a student record. You have first name, last name, you have address, you have a lot of different types of information, GPA that goes with it. So if you want to put everything together, that's when we use structs. So here's an example of an inventory tag, which uses an item ID and quantity remaining. And this is your actual struct data type. And then you use that inside of main. Okay. Structs, once you have created them, are more like objects. They can be passed to functions as individual objects. Let me find a good example. And I'll show you some of these things as we go through my program example here. So here is a home struct. It has 4 different integers. And then there is an init home function where you can return a struct. So structs can be passed by value, can be returned. So the init home is a function that initializes the numbers, the values of that struct, and it returns. So the way we use it is in main, we create a variable of this type struct. So my home is a variable, and as we create, we call init home. And so it calls this function, and when it creates my home, it initializes everything to the values that we put in here. So number of people is 8, number of bathrooms is 4, number of floors is 2, and number of rooms is 7. And we are only printing number of bathrooms and number of people. So we have 4 and 8, right? Okay. So that's kind of how the structs work. So I hope you've gone through some of these challenge activities. Here's a struct with product info where you have 2 different data types, a char array and a quantity that is of type int. So, and that's the whole point of a struct, is to have different data types. And here the product has some functions as well. The struct has a function that says increase item quantity. So every time you increase the value or you call this function, it increases the value by a certain amount. Okay, so if you look in main, you have product info. This is the variable. This is one mug object that we're creating. We create a local variable called add stock. We read some information from the user. We read item name, item quantity for the mug, and we read a value for add stock. And then we are going to, here's where we need to write the code where, let's try and do this real quick, where you will write the code, write a statement that calls the function increase item quantity with parameters mug info and add stock. This is very similar to your lab that we're going to take a look at in a minute. Assign mug info with the returned value. So first of all, you want to call this function increase item quantity, and you want to pass, it says you need to pass 2 things to it. One is the actual struct variable, which in my case here is mug info. The other is the value to increase, which is add stock. All of this we have read from the user. And then it says whatever comes back, and who's coming back? A struct variable. Put it back, assign it back to mug info. So here you would say mug info equals whatever comes back. So in goes mug info with the original item name and quantity. Add stock is a number that gets added to it, comes back, and it goes in here. And so when we print the information out, it will be with the new quantity, because that's what we are doing here. We are increasing the quantity of the stock by 1. So if you do check, hopefully if I did it right, it should take the add stock, add it to the quantity of mug info, and return it, and the return value should go in there. So 7, 5, 7 becomes 12. The number 7 is incremented by 5, right? 14 and 3 becomes 17. Okay, you kind of see how it works. Now, I have a sample program here that we're going to take a look at. This is about food item. So what we're doing here is, again, it's all the same thing. We are creating a struct and we're doing something with the struct. This particular struct of mine has a food item with a name and double fat, very similar to what we just saw with the mug info. And the struct is created. I have a few functions. I have an init function that will set some values. I have a set food item, again, which is the same. It is not initializing, but it's setting the food item with the values coming in. So this is initializing. By default, if you send it no parameters, then this gets called when you create the struct object. And this gets called when you send it a name and a number. And the get name says, I'm going to return the name of the item if you pass in a food item. Okay. This says get fat says I'll return the fat if you send me a food item. It's a double. This is a char array, so we are not returning anything. Get total fat says I will take the food item, get its fat and multiply it by the number of servings and give you the total number of fat. Print says print all the information. So if you go take a look at the implementation of all this, if it is init food item, that means and this is just something that I came up with, in fact, Zybooks came up with, it says if the food item is created with water, then you set the name to water and you set the fat to 0 and you return it. Okay, so, and then we're going to see how to put all this together in main. If the food item comes in with a name with other than water, then we ask them for the fat value and we set the name of the food item to whatever they enter. And then we set the fat value to the fat value for the item and we return the food item. Okay. Get name simply returns the name of the food item in a local variable in a parameter that comes in. Take the food item's name, copy it into name and send it back. Same thing with with fat. Get the food item and return its fat, and we can receive it into a temporary variable on the receiving side. Get total fat takes the food item, its fat, and multiplies it by the number of servings that comes in. So if the user says they had 3 servings and 3 times the number of fat for that particular food item, right? And then nutritional value just prints all the stuff. Well, only thing I have is fat. You can take this program and expand it to have other things. Now, how do we use all this stuff in main? So if your requirement says that in main, create a food item, set its name to something, set its fat to something, and try to get the number of servings, and then find the total fat, okay? So in main, you first include your food item.h, then you create a food item. This is very important, right? You must create a food item, your variable. Then you create some local variables to read information from the user, char item name, because your food has a name and a fat variable, fat data member. So you create 2 local variables for that. You read item name from the user. Okay, at least that's what I'm doing in this case. If the item name is water or water, uppercase or lowercase, then I call init food item and create this food item. So by saying food item equals init food item, it will call init food item. It comes in here. Where's my init food item? Right here. Creates a local variable called food item, sets its name to water, sets the fat value to 0 and returns it. When it returns, it comes here and it gets copied in here. So just like any other int variable or a simple data type, right? It's just your struct. It comes back here, gets copied into food item. Then I send it to my print info, which just prints it, which is down here. It simply says print whatever information that I give it. So it prints its fat, which is all I have right now. And then it also prints a total fat. Okay, and by default, I just calculate for 1 serving. See, that's a hard-coded 1 in there. So the get total fat takes the number of servings, which is a 1 in this case, and just multiplies it and returns it. Returns the total fat, which I print here. I don't receive it into any variable. I just print it out directly. That's what this is, calling the food get total fat function in printf statement. Okay, what if they don't enter water? If they don't enter water, then I read the amount of fat from them and the number of servings. I don't have any prompts, that's okay. That's what I'm reading here. Amount of fat and number of servings from the user. Right here is the number of servings. I set the food item name. I create a food item by calling set food item with the item name and amount fat. So now that calls this function here, set food item, takes a name and copies it into food item's name. Again, we create this local variable, set its values, return it. and that comes back here and goes in here, okay? And then we read the number of servings, we print the food item here, and then we calculate the fat for that food item for one serving and the number of servings they entered. So when you run this program, it looks like this. If I enter, there are no prompts, so it doesn't say anything. But if I enter water, it automatically just sets the fat value to 0 because that is what we told it to do. If I run it and enter apple, then it waits for me to enter fat and how many servings I had. So it says fat is 4 grams. Grams of fat for one serving is 4, for 5 servings is 20, which is what we told it to do. Okay. Now, your lab is very similar to this. So if you look at your vending machine lab, which I hope is the next lab after this. Let's go back here. And okay, here is your vending machine lab. It says given 2 integers as user inputs that represent the number of drinks to buy and the number of bottles to restock. Create a vending machine variable that performs the following operations. So first you need to create this vending machine variable, just like this food item variable that we created here, okay? Then purchases input number of drinks, restocks input number of bottles. So you need to have 2 integers. So first of all, let's take a look and see what's here. If you look at vending machine.h, here's the struct. It takes the number of bottles. So if you say you want to purchase 5 bottles, purchase, there's a function written for purchase that takes the amount of bottles you want and takes the vending machine. The vending machine has a number of bottles. If you say you want to, if the amount of bottles you want to buy is 5, then the vending machine is going to subtract 5 bottles from itself, right? If you want to restock and the amount of bottles you want to restock is 10, then it's going to add 10 to its number of bottles. That's really what it's supposed to do, right? That's how a vending machine works. You take something, you put something back. Get inventory should simply return the number of bottles, and report does something. So let's see what they all do. If you go take a look at the implementation of these functions, init sets creates a vending machine, just like our food item created a variable and set its values and returned it. We are creating a new vending machine. We are setting the number of bottles to 20, and then we are returning it. So anytime I call init, I will get a new vending machine with 20 bottles in it. Purchase takes the number of bottles I want to buy and it subtracts it from itself. So if my initial vending machine has 20 bottles, and if I buy 3, I'm going to be left with the vending machine that has 17 bottles, right? If I had 10 bottles in my vending machine and if I sent 5 in here, then my vending machine is going to come back with 15 bottles. You see how it works? The get inventory simply returns the number of bottles. The report prints it. Now your job is go to main and simply call these functions. So your first job is to create a vending machine variable, just like I did here, create the food item variable, you'd create a vending machine variable. Then just like I created local variables, you would create 2 of them. They're a little different. You would create an int for purchase and int for restock. Okay. So then using those 2 variables, send them to your vending machine. Okay, so if you come here and declare you need to know what is the name of your struct vending machine. So use that. I'm going to do a couple of lines and I'm going to let you do the rest of it. You're going to come here and you're going to say vending machine, my VM, whatever I want to call it. That's my vending machine. And then you would want to call the init function. So the init function, you could just do it at the same time. Init vending machine, that's what it's called. So what you want to do is you want to say my VM equals, and you can call the init vending machine right away. So it will initialize it. My vending machine now will have 20 bottles because that's what we told it to do, right? Then using my VM, you call your other functions. Declare 2 local variables, int, call it, I don't know, whatever you want to call it, purchase and restock. And then you probably should read these from the user because that's what it says. If there's an input, 5 and 2. So you want to use your scanf and read all this from the user. those two values. And then you're going to say myVM dot, who's the function to call first? If you call your purchase function, send that variable and your vending machine to it. Then you call your restock function and send amount, which is the other variable, restock, and myVM to it. And then using myVM, you just call report and it will print it. Okay, try it. Assignment 8, which is your calculator, is kind of, again, very similar to that. We are dealing with more structs. So it says create a calculator struct with just one value for the calculator's current value. And then I have you do a bunch of things. Init calculator, and tells you what each function should do. Init calculator initializes the data member to 0. Now you're given some starter files. Don't forget, download main.c and add the welcome message for your program. Your main.c is given. Okay, I show you how to call it. It's a little backwards from the vending machine. You're given main, and you need to write all the functions. Okay, so you need to do your calculator.h and calculator.c. So you're supposed to create your struct and put all these function prototypes in calculator.h and in calc.c. Go ahead and do all of these implementations. And it tells you how to implement each one of these. Given to input values num1 and num2, the program outputs the following values. Okay, so if you write your calculator.h and c appropriately, the initial value of the data member is 0. Okay, that's easy. The value after adding num1. So you simply take the parameter num1 and add it to value and return it. The value after multiplying by 3. Take the value and multiply by 3. Value after subtracting num2. So it takes a number and subtracts from itself. Divides by 2. So how does main look? I created a calculator calc and initialized it. So your init calculator must set value to 0. We just talked about that. Read two numbers from the user, and each one of the functions should do something. Now, notice not all functions take num values. For example, multiplying by 3 does not take any other parameter. It simply takes whatever it has and multiplies by 3. This takes the num2 parameter. Again, dividing just divides by 2. So not every function takes that num1 and num2 parameter. Sometimes they just do something with the value in there. Okay, so try it, and if you have any questions, post it in your discussion board or email your instructor.